Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon for those joining from the different regions, from Africa particularly, and good morning, everyone connecting from DC. I think we have a couple of people who are still joining in, but maybe in the interest of time and for everyone who was joining us at the beginning, let us start. We have organized, after a couple of moving around with the date, a BBL or a panel discussion where we want to discuss what's next on the hydromet agenda, a conversation on the regional initiatives for strengthening weather, water, climate services, early warning services in Central and in Southern Africa. It's based on analytical work which was done in the context of the ACP program, building disaster resilience to natural hazards in Sub-Saharan African regions, countries and communities. It's also known for the World Bank people with the big abbreviation, the R2 program. So we'll have two studies today which will be presented, which was developed for Central Africa together with the Central African Economic Community, and one which was developed together with the Southern African Development Community. And then we have 4 TTLs working in the region. Atishe, Nathan, Laurent, and Makoto will be reflect a bit on what that really means for their work. And hopefully, if time allows, we really want to go into a discussion. How can we, connect the dots and give it a meaningful impact for our work? What are the opportunities to take this forward to make an impact to our clients? With that, let me not spend a lot of time discussing. Welcome everyone, and give it over to Ana Campos, the lead specialist overseeing the DRM program in the Africa region, for opening remarks, and then we'll jump straight into the matter with our presenters. Ana, over to you.
Thanks very much, Carl, and welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone, and thanks for joining today to this panel in the Central and Southern Africa hydromet services. As Carl has indicated, we have been working since 2016 to 2021 on some regional studies to try to identify what was the status quo, what were the needs, the opportunities for investments and for regional collaboration in the hydromet services in these two sub-regions in Africa. And we thought it was a very good opportunity not only to show the results, but also to see how we connect these analytical products with our dialogue on the resilience agenda from different sectors and connecting to our operations. So the idea of this panel will be to share the results, but also to be able to connect the dots with the dialogue that the different details are having from the climate, water, disaster management agenda, and how to scale up the hydromet services and the early warning systems in the region. So we have a very tight agenda. I'm not going to take too much time, but I welcome everyone, and thanks for your contributions on the studies, and looking forward to hear from the different details on how we connect the different results with their engagements they have in the countries. So over to you, Carl. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. And I'll also don't spend much time. I will introduce Marieke de Groen. Marieke de Groen is from the consultants team, which we brought on board to help us do, a status analysis and also investment planning on the status of hydromet services in Southern Africa. We worked therefore together through the R2 program with the SADC Secretariat and the SADC Climate Service Center, and the team from Aqualinks and Royal Haskoning has helped us over a period of 1.5 years in the middle of the Corona time, actually, to do a stock taking and to assess what is the status of the national hydromet services, but also what would be avenues going forward to strengthen them and have them working closer with the regional entities. So Marieke, maybe, walk us through your presentation. We'll join right after that the second presentation on the Central Africa region, and then we'll come in with the discussions and have then the floor open for everyone who has any specific questions on those presentations. Marieke, she's the director of Aqualinks, and has been with a PhD in hydrology from Delft University, and she has been in the region in Southern Africa and based in Johannesburg since 2001, and been active on many fronts on the water and weather issues. I also see next to her on the screen is also the task team leader, also from Royal Haskoning, Pierre Driesen. But I think Marike will present and bring everything forward. So Marike, over to you, and share your screen and walk us through the key results of those studies.
Thanks, Carl, for that introduction. Let me move to the screen. Yeah. I'll switch off my camera because I'm looking at the bigger screen now. Wait, how do we do that? Okay, now let's leave it, but you'll see me watching the other screen. Aqualinks was sub-consulted by Royal Haskoning DHV, and Tjeerd is present today of the Royal Haskoning DHV, a far bigger company. Both Tjeerd and me are based in Johannesburg, and we work together with Weather Impact, a Dutch-based company focusing on weather advisories mainly for agribusinesses, but in this case broader. So the project has 4 deliverables. The main focus is on the stock taking report, and then there's an academic and public sector engagement report, an investment framework and action plan, and we also supported sessions at SADC Hydromet Forum. I point this out because these are all available for more detailed information than I can summarize in this 10 minutes. And the devil is in the detail, as most of you know. So brief project introduction. So in SADC there are 16 countries, and we were dealing with 49 organizations, not only the Met and Hydro services, but also to evaluate those 2 services, the disaster management departments and the river basin organizations. We had everything was digital, so we worked with questionnaires and workshops, and we got responses. And most important from these questionnaires is to point out that we mainly worked with multiple choice questions to evaluate and categorize the answers. And we worked with the WMO capacity development strategy to make a metric for the level of all these services. And then we had online workshops where we discussed and verified information, which was again followed up by bilateral calls. Another important report was Weathering the Change, which influenced mainly our metric and our questions for the meteorological services, but also for the hydro services. And here in the right corner, I mentioned the team that worked together virtually, both from World Bank and from us. To start with the result of the stock taking, here you see the different countries given a certain score, an overall score that is. So it might be that in certain aspects they were still behind, but in others they were ahead, and that's an overall score in the end. The main message of this slide is that the hydrological services are generally at a lower level than the Met services, and especially for this disaster management with water having such a key role, that's an important message. First part of the hydromet value chain is the observations and the monitoring. I want to point out a few things here. First of all, a lot of maintenance doesn't happen because of lack of basic means like fuel, transport and spare parts. So the field teams are under-equipped. And then, especially for the Met services, there's a lack of upper air measurements. And these upper air measurements are not only important for the country, but also to improve the global weather forecast models, which cascade down again to the Met services. Then for the hydro services, there's a complete lack of updating of rating curves and calibrating rating curves. And rating curves, for those who don't know what those are, it's you measure a weather level, but you want to know the flow. And to know that, you regularly have to measure with a boat or with other equipment the whole stream and update these rating curves. Then for satellite use, that is generally remote sensing is quite used for interpretation by Met services, but not yet at the right level for the hydro services. And then there are, of course, wishes. Nice wishes for extra stations and radar stations, and in our investment plan we didn't all give these wishes a chance, because we first thought these points mentioned above are more important. For data processing, analysis, and modeling. I also am not going to mention everything, but generally there is a database management system, but archives are mainly available on paper. And key is that a lot of data are not uploaded to the WMO telemetry system, which again influences the cascading forecasting process. Many countries still want a limited area model for their own country, and have one. And the modeling part in the hydro services is very limited, and there's a lack of exchange of data on an operational basis between the NMSs and the NHSs. That's still they are in different ministries. And that's not yet properly operationalized. For disaster risk management, it's of course lead time and accuracy are important, and then in particular the 5 to a month forecast are still low in skill. Services, including early warning. Basically, there's a lack of staff, which really focuses on understanding the needs of the users and making user-friendly products. And those can be impact-based forecasting products. But although almost everybody knows what impact-based is, this is still implemented at a very simplified form. Yeah, so for metro services, I further want to point out that agricultural sector services are very basic still, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity there. Enabling factors, this is what is behind to get this hydromet value chain working. Yeah, again, the cascading forecasting process of using global models and then interpreting these locally needs more IT infrastructure in the Met services. And another point which is very important to mention, in addition to what is already mentioned before, is the standard operating procedure. So that there is indeed a clear agreement between the Met services, the hydro services, and the disaster risk management on how to exchange data and information when an event happens. Further, there's regional organizations which can really support the Met service and hydro services, but they are really almost project finance driven, so they need incapacitation and better cooperation between them. Academic and private sector engagement, that's a separate report. So we used the questionnaires and the workshops as inputs, but we also did additional interviews with representatives of academic networks and had 3 workshops and analysis of 3 case studies for which, and the meteorological services were selected for Malawi on weather index-based crop insurance, for Madagascar on crop-specific advice, and for Eswatini on lightning detection services. Well, there's a lot to conclude again, but some main points is that, okay, these networks, to what extent can they support? Well, they are really research focused, and the research which happens nationally by universities is often not tailor-made for MHSs, and so they mainly come for data, but they don't have a clear engagement with, okay, here we can, the universities can help the offices. And there's very much the South African universities are well represented in these networks, while other SADC countries have less representation. So it's not a level playing field yet. For private, it's important to emphasize that, yeah, these NMHSs to develop such public-private engagement, they really need support in how to develop potential business models and become more client-centric. There are also some legal bottlenecks to overcome, but the main thing is make them more client service oriented. Then we move to the investments. This is well, maybe readable on your screen. It's of course very text dense, but I know you will get this presentation afterwards. So what we did is a bit in the theory of change. We had one big goal. The investment plan only focuses on early warning, by the way, as per the scope of work, not evaluating everything which the officers do. And then we had 4 goals, and the first goal focuses on this regional cooperation and cooperation between different, strengthening these different regional organizations. The second is focusing on observation and monitoring. And then there's one in improving lead time and accuracy for forecasts. And last one on improved generation and dissemination of warnings for specific user groups. And this was all used. Each output, which is the light green ones, had different activities, and all these activities had unit costs, and all these unit costs, the units were given to certain organizations and certain countries, so that you have a model. Yeah, and now after more than a year after we finished this, it's important to look if you have a certain project or you have a certain funding for maybe one of these outcomes, or you have a funding for one country, to go back to that model and discuss it with your stakeholders and say, now, is this indeed the way forward, and are the assumptions correct by the consultancy team? I mean, that's why it's a model, because it's all at a certain level. I see Carl appearing, so I assume I'm a bit, the time is coming. So the investment plan is a lean and mean investment plan. We came up with a proposal for 206 million US in total, which includes 10 years of operational costs. But countries have to be aware that in total, for the 16 countries together, there have to be about 277 full-time equivalent personnel who have to make sure that these investments stay useful and are being used. There's a further breakdown below, which I'm not going into right now. For the learning process of the whole project, I want to point out 5 points to finish this presentation. So first of all, digital meetings and questionnaires, they are useful, but not a panacea. We felt that there was some window dressing. I mean, people were presenting things better than they are really on the ground, and we would have found out and made when we would be there. And secondly, questionnaires, people are tired of questionnaires, but we have now a great Power BI database available for you with answers. 3 points for after this project. I understand from Carl and from the communication I've had, it's now these funding is packaged into bigger funding for certain countries. But I think it's important to make aware these NMHSs how they then can lobby with their ministries of finance on that something is really being done. And secondly, I think it's the devil is in the detail. The underlying reports are very important to consult on the World Bank side, but also to feedback to the organization so that they can also use them to inform other projects. And we are very available to help you distribute certain results. Living is about leaving a legacy, and of course a report is not a legacy. We really hope to improve early warning and hydrological and med services in SADC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marieke, for this very detailed but also to the point assessment going into 16 countries over a year and a half in the peak of the COVID period. I think that in a virtual environment that has already in itself been a big achievement. Thanks again for this presentation. As you indicated, the report is we're about to finish it up for publication, so that will also be available for the outside world. With that, let us switch over to the other regional entity, the Community of Central African States, ECCAS. Through the same program, the R2 program, led by Isabelle Forsch, Prashant, and Anke, and the team has worked on a similar assessment, a bit of a different focus, but a similar regional assessment on what is the status of the hydrometeorological services, and Isabelle and Anke will elaborate on this. This study was also prepared with the help of an external team of consultants. Anke will speak on behalf of Deltares for the team which has worked on this. She's a senior project manager working on all kind of early warning and flood management, river basin management related projects. And Isabelle Forsch, you may know her from the work for GFDR and the Africa region as a senior disaster risk management specialist. Isabelle and Anke, over to you to walk us through what are the key findings from the Central Africa Forum, and then we open it up for our discussions to come in.
Thank you very much, Carl. Thank you, Anke, for the presentation in the screen. Can you put it maybe full screen?
I have it full screen. I don't see what you see actually right now.
Okay.
I don't know. Let me try again. Do you see it full screen now?
No.
Okay. I don't know. Is it visible at least? Because when we tested just now, it worked, and I don't really have an idea what else to do.
Yeah, I think we can see it. So let's maybe just go ahead.
Okay.
With the slides.
Okay. Is that full screen now?
Here we go.
Okay, thank you. So I have the end, Anke. I took it. So thank you very much for inviting us to present what has been done under this Result 2 program, and in particular on this ECCAS region, a community of Central African states. Just maybe to have an idea of the scope, geographic scope, and such differences of this economic region. As you can see in this map, member states of ECCAS are from Chad down to Angola. What I wanted to highlight also is that Angola and DRC are also member states of the SADC community. So every time we work with them, we have to have in mind that there are some cross-cutting opportunities, and this is very, very important. Just a detail on that is that DRC is very much involved in ECCAS because it's a French-speaking country. So it's easier on the one hand for them to participate to ECCAS regional integration. And because they are all part of this Congo Basin forest. Angola is much more working with SADC, actually, I should say, though. So most of the time, it's not easy to have them participate to the ECCAS events. So the idea that we had working with this regional economic community was to give them the opportunity with the funding from ACP to have a better understanding first of the overall risk and the state of the art of hazards in their region, which they didn't have at all. So like in other regions, like in IGAD, for instance, they had this project a few years ago to build a risk atlas and giving them an overview of what is going on in their region, where you can find these transboundary issues, which make the regional integration so important at disaster and risk level in general. So we made first this risk atlas, and of course there's the databases which are part of this atlas. They are looking for all the flooding, drought risk, the geotechnic, climatic risk, coastal erosion, as well as marine subversion. And also this risk atlas provide information on 20 main cities all over the region with the different risks that they face. So this is an open source database which has been built by the IGN and BRL, and it is available. So if any one of you needs to have a copy of this risk atlas, it is feasible. So that was an idea to have what's going on at regional and national level, and then focus on hydromet and AWS. So this is the part I will let Anke present, because it has been done with through an assignment with Delta-RES and the consortium with Delta-RES. She will explain to you in a few minutes what has been done under this activity on hydromet. And finally, we were very much closely working in ECCAS with the agriculture department. And we found it important to have also an idea on what was on the agro-silvopastoral and fishery sectors, the relevance of hydromet services that could be very helpful for those sectors in the region, knowing that, as I previously said, the biodiversity and the ecosystem diversity is very huge all over the region. So this is in a nutshell what we've done, sorry, in this analysis. And we had different studies, and part of one is a directory of needs on these hydromet services, and we did it per country. Meaning that for agricultural activities, forestry sector, livestock sector, and fishery, we have per country what is already available, what is very important to gather, like information and collect, and what are the main hydromet services which are missing. So I put there in this slide the template of a table of this needs. This one is on Angola's agriculture sector, So as you see, we look at the type of agriculture production, which stage we are talking about, the influence of climate, hydromet products needed, existing products, and the service needs. And we did that for all these different agri sectors. So in a nutshell, we have a kind of overview of what are the most important information which are actually available and the ones which should be reinforced. So it gives an idea to mainstream really this climate risk and focusing on kind of climate smart agriculture and livestock and so on, with the support of hydromet services. All those analyses are available upon request, of course. So now I leave the floor to Anke, who did manage this assignment on hydromet with the other consulting group. Thank you very much. Anke, that's yours.
Yes, thank you, Isabelle. We worked on this question together with two other partners, Concept from Tunisia and Terea from Gabon. And well, Isabelle already showed you that there are specific needs for hydromet services. As you all know, Central Africa accounts for only a very small share of the global greenhouse gas emissions, but at the same time, it's among the regions that are most vulnerable to impacts of climate change because of its limited adaptive capacity. And already now, more than 70% of natural disasters in the region are of meteorological origin. Yeah, and in the figures below, you see that risks related to floods and droughts are very likely to increase even more in future climates. So it is very important to have forecasting and information systems available that help policymakers and decision makers to take appropriate measures. And what did we do in our study? It's actually similar to what Marike already presented for the Southern African region, but we did not only focus on early warning systems, but it was about hydromet services in general. So we started with making a regional synthesis of the state of hydromet services and early warning systems in the 11 countries, also similar to what the other consortium did by means of interviews, literatures and workshops and questionnaires. And we grouped our findings on 6 axes: the institutional level, legislative level, human resources, education, and technical and financial issues. Based on the findings, we prepared a guidance note on how hydromet services and early warning systems could be improved in the region. And finally, this all resulted in a regional framework for regional collaboration and an action plan. And that framework and action plan were discussed in workshops, also online due to COVID, with representatives of all the 11 countries. And there were other people, for example, representatives of regional organizations, such as a River Basin organization present as well. Based on the workshops and discussions, the reports were refined and then finally presented on the second Hydromet Forum that took place last year in May. So what were the main findings? They're actually pretty similar to what Marike told in her presentation. Here on the right-hand side, you see that hydrometeorological services actually contain what we would call a full circle of steps, let's say. They result from an information need, then you start collecting data, you have to manage data, you have to analyze it and evaluate the results, and then finally distribute a specific information to a user that is then going to use the information. And what we found in general, actually in our reports, we try to really make difference between the 11 countries, but due to time, I can't present all these details here now. So if you're interested, I'm happy to talk about it on a one-to-one basis, and also the reports are there. But in general, the problems that we found in the different countries are similar. And also similar to what we heard earlier. So basically, most of the national hydromet services are strongly underfinanced, and they mainly indeed depend on external sources, and that is on projects. So they don't really have a constant flow of financing that would allow them to keep up a specific service on a constant basis. They also have quite some difficulty to recruit sufficient well-qualified personnel. On the one hand, that's because there are only very little opportunities for education and training in the sector available in the region. And on the other hand, also because the few people that would be qualified enough often prefer to work for other employers, for example, in the private sector, because of the salaries that are better there. We also found that the institutional framework around national hydromet services could be improved, because in most cases the responsibilities of the NHMS and any other actors are either not clearly defined, or we see overlap between responsibilities or gaps in responsibilities. So there really needs to be a step taken in that, and clearly defining who's doing what in what order, just clearly defining the processes and the results that need to come out. And then most of the hydromet services have only little and often old technical equipment available. And then I'm not only talking about monitoring stations, but also, for example, hardware and software for data management. So here below, you see a figure of the number of functioning meteorological stations per 10,000 square kilometers per country. And the WMO actually recommends to have at least one per 10,000 square kilometers. And yeah, as you can see, please stay on that slide, Isabel. I'm not finished yet. Could you go back one? Yeah, thank you. As you can see, most of the countries really don't meet that recommendation yet, with the exception of Rwanda and in this case also Sao Tome and Principe, but that's mainly because the country is very small. Yeah, I'm still on that slide. I'll tell you when to move on. Thank you. Because of the funding problem, there's also very little or sometimes even no maintenance of equipment possible in the national services. So in general, to really briefly summarize, in most of the countries, the right-hand side of the cycle of hydromet services is present. So they do data collection and some data management, but it remains rather basic. And we can also take the same conclusion as Marieke on that this applies mainly to the meteorology side, and the hydrological services are in general less advanced than the meteorological services. We also see that most countries have developed or established national platforms for the disaster prevention or management by now. So there are dedicated groups that could use the service. But could you go back still? But yeah, we do see a big gap on the lower left side of the cycle of hydromet services when it comes to actually turning the data, analyzing data and turning it into a dedicated service or product to be used by a specific group of people or specific user, let's say. Okay, next slide. So that are, in a nutshell, the main problems. Of course, there are, by the way, lots of differences between the countries. We try to work them out in more detail in our report. In general, we can say that in Central Africa, Rwanda and also Angola are, I think, the main advanced. The most advanced, they actually started to prepare dedicated products for specific users, in contrast to the others. So what are opportunities? On the institutional level, we do have these a bit more advanced countries, which could act as an example and also help the other countries with ideas and tips and tricks, let's say. There are the national platforms for the disaster risk reduction that I talked of, and also most countries have by now set up national plans for climate change adaptation. So the importance, or decision makers are becoming more and more aware of the importance of hydromet services. So yeah, I think the climate is good for some improvement. We also see opportunities for public-private partnerships, for example, with wood industry or hydropower companies, which would be, which really would benefit from hydrometeorological services. On the technical level, I think more use could be made of global data and modeling products that are available. For example, GFS weather forecasts and GLOFAS flood prediction systems. And there are opportunities for regional cooperation. For example, there are the river basin authorities, and some of them are actually quite active. For example, the ECCAS of the Congo Ubangi-Sanga basin. There they are working on extending the hydromet observation network, and they have also set up a system for data management for the entire basin, so that actually data is better accessible and also archived properly in a digital way in the whole system. And the ECCAS has a clear vision on regional integration, which has been agreed upon as well by the member states. They have already set up the Central African Climate Prediction and Application Center, which is seated in Douala in Cameroon, with the aim to get a WMO regional center, to make a WMO regional center out of it. And that could support the member states in producing hydromet services and early warnings. Then there is a plan to set up a water information system, a système d'information sur l'eau, housed at the ECCAS headquarters in Gabon, with the aim to make data and also any information on the basins available to all the member states. And the Hydromet Forum was set up as a knowledge exchange platform recently. And 2 sessions have already taken place in 2018 and then delayed due to COVID in 2021. And I think it would be a good idea to continue this effort. And then finally, of course, as a result of our study, there is a validated regional framework available with an action plan. And yeah, the main aims are to improve the governance around the national hydromet services at the national level, strengthen capacity for production and use of hydromet services, ensure sustainable funding in the long term, and to reinforce education and training capacities so that the NMHS can mobilize sufficiently qualified personnel in the future. Okay. And suggestions for follow-up actions. So actually we made this action plan which contains a lot of actions, and I think in the end the one I put here is the central one, and all the other ones support this one. And well, the main objective is to, in the end, develop a hydroclimatic multi-risk early warning system, first based on the regional level, but then with specialized branches on a national level, in order to be able to mitigate damage of climate risks in the region. And specific steps that need to be taken are mentioned below. So one should start with creating a regional reference network of hydromet observation stations, or basically start from what is available in the countries and upgrade and extend in order to have sufficient input for an early warning and forecasting system. Then establish a reference database at the regional level, which could be housed at the water information system of the ECCAS. And that in order to make the data accessible and also to archive it properly. Then create a regional center for short to medium range forecasting, which could be housed at the existing CIPC center. Furthermore, we would need to identify major hydrometeorological and climate hazards. And this, as Isabel has shown, has partly been done by now. And really clearly define the services needed, and also that has been done partly by now. I think, yeah, probably the last details need to be discussed, but a big part of this step has been taken already. And then, in the end, a regional early warning system could be created, but it is, I think, very important to keep up specialized branches at the national level. With that, we want to say that, well, the regional, we can have a regional system that, yeah, produces forecasts and early warnings that can be used by the national level. But in the end, the national HMS need to stay responsible for actually issuing forecasts and launching alerts. And they should be able to use the information created by the regional center, but also to refine it with their data and their experience for their specific use cases. And then I think on the regional level, there should be cooperation on the institutionalization of organizational and decision-making processes, and the development of clear warning messages that, yeah, clear in a sense that they can actually be used by the affected population, and that the population also knows what they need to do if they receive a warning. And yeah, strengthen the capacities to respond to early warnings. Okay. So that was some results from our study, really in a nutshell. If you are interested in more details, we are happy to talk about it more in the future. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Anke, and thanks a lot, Isabel, for highlighting this work from the Central Africa region and the work with the Central African economic community on those hydromet service issues. Just as both Marike as well as Isabel have said, the reports I think are available internally for everyone interested at the bank. We are yet to work on making them publishable, so really for the outside world, but this is also to be addressed. But if you are interested, task team leader, I think that those reports should be available to you. We'll now switch over. When we started planning the BBL, we wanted to long disseminate the findings. We thought, should we bring in outside speakers? We said, no, let's first bring in our TTLs, the experts who are working in the region. And I'm excited that we have a couple of them. Atishe Abi, he's a senior DRM specialist, and he is working in Madagascar. And then we'll have Nathan Engel, who will come in, climate change specialist actually from the Water GP. We'll have Laurent Corrier, who will speak on Central Africa, his work in DRC and the Central African Republic, and then Makoto to give us some general linkages and the work on the cruise program. But when we had that first conversation, we want to really hear from the TTLs. So with all of the analytical work which has been done, how does that really reflect and resonate with the work, with the, how to call it, with the work you are seeing, with your dialogue with the clients? So how does that reflect to the key issues raised by the clients, by working with the different Met services, with the different ministries, with the different agencies, with the CMUs as well, on their needs? And where do you see opportunities in general for the hydromet work, but also obviously to take some of the recommendations forward? Maybe let's start with Atishe, all the way from Madagascar to come in and show us, reflect a bit on how do you see those issues coming forward. And just as an announcement, I think once we've gone through, gives the opportunity to our TTLs, we'll open the floor obviously to everyone to come in. I'm sure there will be questions on the analytical work, but also your reflections on, what's next, where are the issues to go forward, what should we do in the region to address these issues. So for the question and answer, either if you want to start already putting it in the chat to make sure it doesn't get lost, or then raise your hands later when we open the floor. But now over to Atishe and a bit of a reflection more from the, how to call it, day-to-day work of your work in Madagascar. Over to you, Atishe.
Thanks a lot, Carl, and all the speakers. I think the presentations and what was shared was very timely, especially in the backdrop of a very heavy cyclone season in Madagascar and this Southwest Indian Ocean. I think overall, the report also reflects very well the situation in Madagascar, particularly when it comes to issues around operation and maintenance, staffing, training, etc., and all the equipments that, the wish list that was spoken about. What we are seeing in the country at this point, and and it was also pointed out in the report, around these enabling factors, like capacity, R&D, training, infrastructure, information. I mean, Madagascar is found wanting on most of them, right? And we are talking about a country that is also an island country, which makes it slightly more difficult to have very clear regional linkages, despite the fact that there are the tropical cyclone systems that are affecting Madagascar, Mozambique, Malawi, and so on and so forth. But if I could very specifically focus on some of the key priorities, opportunities that we have been seeing, and emanating out of the gaps that we have discussed with the Met departments and the National Disasters Management Agencies, right? So, of course, the moment you speak to the Met departments, the first thing comes up is the hard equipment that on the observation and networks, observation and monitoring network that is required. So if you just look at the currently what Madagascar has, the needs are almost over 3 times the entire network, be it sort of synoptic weather stations, both manual and automatic weather stations. Currently, for example, they have 34, but the requirement is about close to 100. They need more hydrological stations, hydromet, AWS, coastal weather stations, etc. So the wish list is obviously there, but I think one of the things that everybody, all the stakeholders sort of agree is, for example, on the radars, right? So they used to have back in up until the 90s, 94, I believe, 4 radars that were given through the by the Japanese, but they don't work anymore, and that's been the case for since the 90s. So there are proposals to have one in north, in the east coast, in the capital Antananarivo, and the west coast. But I think the other point of agreement across all the partners and stakeholders is that what really needs to be focused on is upgrading the existing networks rather than just sort of expanding it, something that the report also highlights. And the fact that the staffing and the budget for O&M is so low, like at this point of time, the annual budget of the Met Department in Madagascar for just technical maintenance is about $35,000. So it's something that that remains a challenge. Of course, the requirements from a forecasting and services perspective that have been identified, they go from seasonal and extended range forecasting to making sure that currently, for example, flash floods and landslides are all nowcasting. They require forecasting because this is an issue, especially in urban areas, including the capital, Thana. One of the things that is coming up again and again is this focus on ocean forecasting. And given how important ports, fishing, fisheries, and maritime services is to Madagascar's economy, I think this is a major priority where localized ocean forecast products are quite critical for the country, and we have them in the region. There is in Comoros, Seychelles, Mozambique, they already have some sort of ocean state forecasting, but currently, Madagascar is using the product from ECCAS. I mean, they are trying to see if they can use the ECCAS, the product generated by ECCAS in India and ECMWF. Then there is the entire issue around downscaling the forecast. So currently, we have the model, ECMWF model, which is open from downscaling 20 kilometers to 3 kilometers, but then how do you undertake that without any high computing power, right? Which currently Madagascar does not have. And I feel that is one place where regional cooperation can really help, where if there is some sort of a high processing computer available in one of the climate services centers, then that can really bring down the cost and provide downscaled forecasting, which currently if it takes about 15 hours, you're reducing that to about 3 to 4 hours just to sort of process that information, right? The other part is, which is again quite critical, is around the value added services. So in terms of hydromet services, given the role of agriculture and how the situation around drought monitoring, etc., hydromet services are clearly something that needs to be scaled up. We currently have about 30 odd hydromet AWSs, which needs to be taken up to over 100, 150. And also some sort of a decision support system. For example, there is Sesame that is used in some parts of South Asia that I know of, that can be deployed in Madagascar to really provide timely support to farmers on weather, seasonal outlooks, any sort of climate and extreme event information. But the key, again, it comes down to is how much of it is already planned and where are the opportunities. So we know that, for example, around $40 million worth of investments are sort of planned. Proposals have been put forward through regional projects, whether it's the IOC or through other partners like the French Development Agency. They've also shared under the PPCR work, there were investments planned for about 25 million for specifically on hydromet services. So there is enough groundwork that has been done to identify where the needs are, how they can be met. But I think financing remains a key. There have been proposals that have been rejected in the past, and that's something that the country has been sort of facing a challenge in the last few years. I think we need to really closely partner with cooperate with partners like AFD, GCF, GIZ, because they have been working in this space with the Meteo for a long time. And one of the challenges in terms of dialogue remains that a lot of these assessments, capacity building, diagnostics, etc., has been happening for a long time. And the moment you go to the client to again sort of update your understanding of what it is, there is a bit of resistance because actual investments aren't coming forth. There are a lot of offerings on table on training, capacity building of the staff, etc. But I think time has come that we also start looking at how to take this to the next level in terms of rehabilitation of certain existing network systems, and looking at the viability of some of the priority observation and monitoring networks that have been put forward by the country that can be serviced. And I think regional cooperation obviously is key here, particularly when it comes to using any sort of economies of scale for high computing power, or taking the models to downscale, and really just understanding the best practices and technical resources around risk understanding, warning dissemination, etc. And the final point is around the fact that given how large Madagascar is, it's extremely important to build capacity at the community level to do some sort of community-based early warning system, because there are requirements for highly localized flood warning systems, and making sure that the warning dissemination happens at the last mile. But given how fragmented the early warning systems and the institutional setup is in Madagascar, it is important that we sort of try and harmonize this across, the DRM agencies, the flood protection agency, the Met agency, and try to see how a multi-hazard early warning system can be developed in the country, which also then delivers services absolutely to the last mile, to the vulnerable communities, especially the ones that we saw were hit again and again by the cyclones and flooding in this season, and frankly have been in the past as well. So I'll stop there, and if there are any just one final point was that in the report I noticed that there were some areas that were either put as unanswered, or there were certain data gaps with respect to Madagascar. If the team wants, we have that information, and we will be happy to provide that information to the team if they ever decide to update any of these reports. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks Atishay for for really putting that perspective of what is happening in Madagascar, and even making the linkages to the report. I think it's very very good reflection on the report, but also how does that relate to the day-to-day work. Now it's to give Nathan Engel the floor. He's a senior climate change specialist in the Water GP, obviously focusing on bringing the the climate issues into the water operations, but really we worked throughout the process with his team on the drought assessment, which was done, I would say, in parallel or together for Southern Africa. And I think that's the reason I'm glad that that Nathan is available to to reflect a bit on this issue. How how does that link to the regional drought work? Where are the linkages on the importance of with the hydromet services? Nathan, let's not lose too much time. Over to you to share a bit on your reflections, and also your team has been involved pretty much from the beginning as well in some of the analysis in Southern Africa.
Thanks so much, Carl, and thanks to the presenters. I really thought that it covered a lot of ground, and like Ishta, I think that the very similar messages resonated. But I'm going to try to situate those findings in the context, as you noted, on the drought work that we've been doing in the region, particularly working to build drought preparedness in a more proactive approach, which is at the foundation of which is developing a really robust but flexible drought monitoring and early warning system. So we've been working with several countries to kind of anchor it, particularly Eswatini, Botswana, and Zimbabwe, to really start to build it from the ground up in these countries. And the purpose is really to be able to better define when a country or a region within a country is entering and exiting drought, so that they're more prepared proactively again to be able to more efficiently respond to the droughts. It's currently based on, right now, remotely sensed data that is considered a composite or combined drought indicator approach that really brings together 4 Earth observation parameters. It's precipitation, evapotranspiration, root zone soil moisture, and vegetation health. I wanted to say here, I thought it was really interesting that, at least in Marika's presentation, that I think that she said they found that 7 out of the 12 surveyed hydromet agencies did not actually rely on remotely sensed data, if I saw that finding correctly in her presentation, in order to do drought monitoring and early warning system. I think this is key to be able to complement that in situ data with remotely sensed data. So the index itself, or this CDI approach, is is different in the sense that it's a bottom-up approach that involves a convergence of evidence, bringing together the various indicators into a percentile ranking that situates a given drought in its historical context. So it can say, here we're entering a 1 in 50-year event, and it's communicating it consistently across the different regions of the country and potentially across different countries. But while the local nuances could be different for what comprises an index or what the weightings of that index of the CDI might be. But importantly, it's not kind of your typical, what I would say, top-down lab-produced drought index where it's being created and then expected to be used. The way that it becomes better utilized and actually informing decisions is that it has a real stakeholder kind of validation and feedback mechanism, not only for those that are producing it, and we're working in these countries with the Met Service, but oftentimes the Disaster Management Agency, Ministry of Agriculture, and also the Ministries of Water. But it really brings it onto the ground so that it can be validated as it's being published and tweaked along the way where needed to better capture the drought impacts as they're occurring. So I think it's really important to have this kind of dynamic cross-institutional, and the previous discussant mentioned it, these partnerships and the collaboration across institutions to really work together to translate it into decision-making. 2 quick examples of that, and then I'll wrap up. In Eswatini, we're working with the Disaster Management Agency to really bring these, the CDI onto the ground by training and involving kind of a cadre of citizen scientists that are based in the different parts of the regions that have volunteered to be able to report impacts as they're occurring. So getting them trained on this is really important, as well as kind of working with, and this was also mentioned in Marika's presentation on impacts financing or impacts-based forecasting, and we're working with Eswatini as well to do some of that with the Red Cross Red Crescent Society with forecast-based financing. One thing I do want to note, I think it was quite, we see this all the time in the water global practice that the hydrological part of the hydromet services is often weaker, and I think that's really something we're trying to support, building the capacity in a country like Botswana, who's got a really strong water-related ministry, and they really want to kind of push the envelope for what they're developing in terms of a monitoring and early warning system for drought. Because it's being led by water, they're looking into things like developing a more hydrological-based combined drought indicator to go and complement the one that I mentioned earlier, like the one we're developing in Eswatini, which is more agricultural or ecosystems based. So, this still needs, though, the collaboration with water across DRM and Met Services to really make it work in a sustainable way. Last thing I'll mention is that I'm really looking forward to digging more into the report on the investment prioritization part in particular, because we've also been working, starting conversations, picking up, I think, where the team left off with the SADC Secretariat on how we can think about operationalizing this combined drought indicator to have a more harmonized declaration of drought across the different countries, more consistent characterization and communication. So we're just starting that. I think it's a really good example of where you can take some of the, something like this assessment in this report that was done and actually start to translate this into some concrete actions that can inform decision-making and build capacity, that regional capacity that was referred to throughout the presentations. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. I think, good to give us a background again also on this drought work, and good to hear that you've been able to take the conversations with the SADC Secretariat on some of those issues forward. SADC and the ECCAS, the Central Africa body, they overlap on Angola and DRC. So I'm glad that Laurent Courrier will be giving us a bit of a reflection of his work together with the team on the work in DRC, but also in the Central African Republic. I think in DRC we have for quite some years now a grant-financed program in support of the Met Services. I guess you work closely with Metelsat, and they've been more attached to the Central Africa community. But Laurent, maybe similar to Atiche, give us a bit of a reflection of, how does it relate to the issues raised by the clients, by Metelsat and the other entities in DRC or in the Central African Republic, and where you see opportunities or even challenges on taking this forward?
Thank you, Carl. So yeah, and I actually work.
Well, can you speak a bit more to the mic? I think we'll have a bit. You sound a bit distant.
Can you hear me? Is that better? Hello?
Not yet, but maybe try again, and then we'll take it from there.
Very close to the mic. Phone number. Hello, can you hear me better?
Now we have you full on. Yes,
Oh,
thanks.
I connected the audio through the phone. Perfect. So thank you so much, Carl. So yeah, just I'm speaking more from like a disaster risk management specialist perspective. So I work in operation in DRC and in CAR. So I'm on the ground. I usually typically use data to inform flood risk assessment and then develop risk-informed planning. And of course, with the goal to increase the urban resilience in main cities. And so I work closely with project implementation unit, city officials, and I think my comment today will be more towards the national and the local level. So based on what I heard from the presentation and all the challenges that have been described at the regional level really resonate also with my experience on the ground, and we share like similar challenges. And for instance, with the client, we talked about that already in the presentation with some discussion, but it's really about the sustainability of the approach, and how whichever investment or support that we are providing, we will be able to continue it over time, be it in terms of funding, to make sure that the material is repaired or lasts over time. It can be in terms of logistics. Sometimes we somehow pour on clients a lot of data, but we have daunting, challenging in terms of data management system, and the client is not even able to absorb or use that data. And sometimes it's about building capacity. There is great staffing gaps and also dire needs in terms of capacity strengthening. But then just because DRC and CAR are also FCV context, is really also for us about how to operate on the ground. And this is a very practical, concern, issues and challenge, but sometimes it's just difficult for us to access sites, obtain the right permits, secure the material and the staff. And for instance, in Kinshasa, we've been working over the past 2 years, implementing several grants to support hydromet services and flood and erosion risk assessment. And it took us about a year to actually complete the LiDAR due to the complexity and the different administrative steps in order to put that into operation. So in countries like CAR and DRC, and they rank pretty low in the reports as compared to other countries, it's all of the challenges that we're talking about, but exacerbated. And for instance, at some point it was mentioned also the question of the importance of agreement, or the need for protocols, institutional arrangement. And there again, it's the same issue that we face on the ground, but it's much bigger in a way. And everybody is interested in funding. Everybody is interested to benefit from it for also material and capacity building and so forth. And it's very complex to understand who does what, and there is a lack of clarity on the role. And this we see that a lot, especially in CAR currently, but I'll come back on that. And I think based on what I see from the report and thinking of my own involvement in operation, to me, it's constantly this question of trade-off and the question of the trade-off between introducing a sort of state-of-the-art analytical work or framework and on the other end of the spectrum, introducing something that would be too basic or not accurate enough, and we would even lose the government interest in that. But on both ends, it's difficult because we usually don't find the capacity to actually implement and use those state-of-the-art analytical work. So how can we like simplify, but not simplifying too much so that it's still relevant? And the other challenge that we face on the ground sometimes is related to the implementation time frame, and the urgency that we may have either in respect to an actual event that is about to occur or is occurring already, or coming from the CMU. And there is the urgency of like actually implementing, let's say, an early warning system, and the time that we would actually need to really adequately put it in place. And this is what we are facing a little bit right now in Central African Republic, where the urban unit is co-leading a project with the agriculture unit, and we have a sub-component on early warning system. So we have about $3.4 million to restore and buy a new station to implement across, on the greater Bangui area. And the WFO is gonna support the government. But at first, the contract, the way it was done, was really made to do it really fast, get the station, put them in place, operational the system, have everything ready. But we are really trying to push back and make sure that this turns more into a technical assistance. And now the WFO is working with the civil protection, the water resources department, and indeed the meteorological services, in order to really accompany them in building and operationalizing all this. So it's more like a learning by doing approach, and we are trying to really push and take the time to make sure that there are like longer, like lasting effect on that. So those two trade-offs between the urgency and the complexity of like what we're introducing is, I find it always like challenging, and it involves a lot of discussion with the client around that. And so these are my main takeaway from an operation side. How can we, I know we talk about regional cooperation, but how can we even push more and work more at the national, even local level? How can we translate those framework to each country, because it's each time a different context, and how can we adapt it locally? And I would say something that would be really useful for us is also how can we, let's say, think a bit more in terms of sequencing, and to identify what would be the priority in the short term versus what we can do in the medium, longer term outputs. And I'm mentioning this because there is a lot of things that are actually underlying processes that we need to be in place first in order to then be able to put in place, good like hydromet like services. And I think it would be nice to use that and really focus on this, and also the sequencing as a way to also integrate resilience even in the framework that we are proposing, especially in FCV country, where there is a lot of political instability, there is a lot of conflicts that can emerge anytime, and the plan needs to be flexible. Right now in CAR, it's challenging because the Dutch Red Cross has been working with some of these institutions and trying to establish agreements and protocols, and they have like actually a pretty good like framework and system they want to implement, but it's very daunting when thinking about implementing and going from 0 to 100. And hopefully through the new operation, we're going to have the concept not in September, and hopefully in a year from now we will start implementation. We can work more with them on having, let's say, a sort of like roadmap for implementation, and really adapt to CAR specifically to see how we can like simplify some aspect and tailor them to how it actually works in the country, and also bring in again this like bottom-up approach that was also like mentioned earlier, because we need to have a resilient approach in that sense too. There is a lot of things that unfortunately do not trickle down to the ground, but at the end of the day, it's the communities that are going to be impacted. So it would be nice to involve them more, and to make sure that on that end as well, and work from both ends, we can implement those systems. So I'll stop there. I'm happy to talk more further after the last discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Laurent. I think that with the sequencing you brought up, some important issues. I think Makoto, if I, without losing too much time, call on you to, share. We have just 10 minutes left on our originally scheduled BBL time, and let's try to not overrun too much as people have other assignments. But so maybe very quickly, get us a bit on your reflection, and also, one point which we haven't yet discussed. What is your, what's the opportunities for, engaging using the TA opportunities, the cruise program, to kickstart on more country levels those engagements. Now that we have quite a solid, couple of hundreds of pages of reports, what are the opportunities to take that forward on this level? Makoto, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Carl. So initially, I wanted to make the 3 points, but in the interest of time, then perhaps that skip the 2 of them. That the first one actually I wanted to talk was this entry point of the discussion at the country and the regional level, and the second one was the public-private engagement. But then I'll be focusing just on the third point, which is the TA and the cruise. So as some of you know that the climate risks and early warning system initiative is the trust fund and the main source of funding to support various technical assistance activities related to the hydromet and the early warning systems in Africa. In the southern and the central Africa, we have a project currently ongoing for the Southwest Indian Ocean, and we have a couple in the pipeline, including one for Malawi. And there is the one for Central Africa, which has been approved recently, which will finance activities in the Central African Republic, Rwanda, Burundi, and our continued support in the DRC. So I think that the cruise has been and will continue to be that one of the main vehicle to support the development of the hydromet portfolio and activities in Africa. And then, by the way, that if anybody connected in this BBL who is interested in cruise, and please feel free to contact us and we can discuss further. But not only that, I think that cruise also could be that the vehicle to advance at a couple of the strategic discussions, including that how we're gonna link that the hydromet to some of the key strategic and priority socioeconomic sectors, and then that they enhance the narratives of the service development. I mean, at the end of the day, of course, that the hydromet services should show the tangible impacts, and that the best way to do it is actually to provide and develop and provide services. And many med services, as many of you already pointed out, have a very limited capacity. So we cannot be very ambitious from the beginning. Maybe that we can help them to focus on the 1 or 2 key services to develop and deliver and to show the tangible impact, so that maybe that cruise can kind of help advance that kind of discussion. And also that the other strategic issues, including the public-private engagement, for instance, again, that because of the limited capacity of med services, we cannot really expect them to do everything by themselves. So how we're gonna, bring in the partners? It could be the line ministry, ministries, NGOs, CSOs type, but also the academic sectors and private sectors. So how we're going to advance this discussion? I think the cruise could offer very precious resources to do that. Yeah, so I'll just stop here because we have also the Vladimir waiting to make a remark. So thank you very much. Back to you, Carl.
Thanks, Makoto. I think we have now really closed the loop again on the analytical work, perspective from the countries, perspective from the regional drought assessment, all the way to cruise. I don't know, are there from the colleagues connected specific questions? So then maybe you want to raise your hand. I'll see if we have a minute or two to let you come in with questions, either to the authors of the of the analytical reports, or to the other TTLs, or just to share your thought in which directions some of the discussions should be taken. Yeah, please don't hesitate to come in, raising your hand, I'll guess, but in the interest of time and to make sure that we are wrapping up a bit on time. Let me introduce Vladimir Tsekunov. He is leading the hydromet work globally at the World Bank and in the GFDR Secretariat. I think Vladimir will give us a bit of, leading towards the closing remarks already, leading to his closing remarks, give a reflection on, connecting essentially the dots. We have seen a lot of actors are busy, the UN agencies, notably WMO, the World Bank, other development partners, the governments. So connecting a bit those dots, what are the opportunities which are currently emerging in the different discussions at the management level on hydromet services, and reflections on taking it forward. If there are no questions coming up, but if you want to address anything to either one of the speakers, one of the presenters, or anyone who came in as a discussant, I think don't hesitate to reach out to me, Makoto, or Tetiana, so we can take your question in that sense forward. But now let's hear from Vladimir on what's really on the global perspective and how to take it on again back to the region.
Thanks, Carl, and good to see familiar names and faces. I doubt that I can connect the dots. I probably should thank the two sub-regions for developing these reviews, and consultants did a very good job. I was listening and was kind of thinking that I was hearing the same stories about doom and gloom for quite a long time. I'm in this business for 15 years. So I think we have a bigger task in front of us, which we probably initially underestimated the complexity. We keep talking about the same issues, sustainability, staffing, capacity building. I know that there is no golden bullet, but what is different over this 15 years is that attention from our institution and from other development institutions, and to some degree from the nations which are clients, developing countries, to this area. Problem is, we cannot communicate this message well enough to this sufficiently high political level. And until recently, there were no estimates how much would it cost to run NMHS. We both on the meteo side and the hydro side. Actually, our team is completing new study about sustainable observation network. So, and on Thursday we will have a decision meeting. So I'm inviting you to listen. Some of that numbers are completely not in line with what we hear. The colleague said Madagascar have 35,000 and operating and maintenance cost. It's less than 5 automatic weather stations without cost of labor. So we have to really think what package of investments, technical assistance, and other things we should develop jointly. And doing that, we should clearly understand that this is the backbone of this system is public area. Even in the most advanced developed countries like New Zealand or Netherlands, 40 to 50% of funding in MHS comes from public sector. In other countries, it's 80, 90%. In US, as you know, it's 100%, and everything is going for free to everybody. So we have, again, to work on all 3 parallel levels, global, and in that sense, such initiative, which I wanted to brief you, but there's no time, like SOF, Systematic Observation Financing Facility, which will be launched actually at the end of June. There are significant commitments made, and they will open their business to support LDCs and seeds. So there will be first time in the second part of this year that countries from this group will be able to apply for this funding. So on the global level, again, this is completely under assumption that global community should support these countries which are not able to develop the data which will go into this GBON system, Global Basic Observation Networks. Somebody also, sorry, I'm jumping from one thing to another. There are too many things to refer to, but somebody mentioned WMO requirements. Unfortunately, WMO, with all due respect, have never calculated what it takes to comply with that requirements. even the most developed countries, Canada, for example, or Australia, they are non-compliant and will never be compliant. Not to say that Vanuatu, with its 4 million square kilometers and GDP lower than $1 billion, cannot cover a fraction of what they're supposed to have according to WMO. So to fill that gap, SOF will allocate few million to every small country. But our role will be, again, to find appropriate toolkit, be it regional, be it national, be it global, to work together with partners which now combine. I mentioned that there is a progress in terms of recognition. So Alliance for Hydromet Development now has all major investors, all developing partners together. We have to voice to develop the joint concept. What can we do? What is the approach? And I will finish in 1 minute. One problem is that many investments which are in our pipeline are not implementable with the amount of public funding from the government. We have to be clear about that. And again, we have to be very much more rigid in terms of endorsing the projects which from our knowledge will be sustainable. We have to be very critical in doing that. And again, I'm inviting you to our decision meeting in a few days, and you will learn more about that. Thank you again. It was a very interesting two reports, and I hope, Carl, that you will provide also presentations and the final reports for the future cooperation with the regional and national partners in these areas. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Vladimir, and I think thanks as well to linking and indicating some of the new initiatives coming up, like the SOF and others to take it forward. And indeed, as you said, some of the discussions have been in the region for many years. Yes, closing the BBL, I see there's no hands raised, but I'm sure you all also want to go back to your other meetings. A couple of colleagues are already rushing off. We'll provide to everyone connected the presentations. I think we'll work with the GFDR team to sort this out. Thanks for the very rich conversation and contributions from our discussants to see how this analytical work really makes some sense to our work in the region. And as we've seen, I guess we could likely now, if we were to start with the discussion, go on for an hour to take this forward. So yeah, I see there's a strong interest in taking this conversation forward and then really trying to dig down what are the different opportunities, what are the issues on a more case by case level. I think that's all from my side, from the organizers. Thanks everyone for connecting. As we said, the reports should be available for everyone internally at the bank to be published, and we'll work out with GFDR how to share the presentation, the recording from the BBL, so that if you want to zoom back on a specific issue, you can do that. And last but not least, before closing, we had planned a second BBL in the same sense on West Africa. We have there already a longer engagement than, for example, in Central and Southern Africa with the ECOWAS Secretariat, but also with many countries over there. I guess the end of the fiscal year is not a good time to really organize BBLs, but we will take it up again in early September, date to be identified, with a similar approach, bringing in the TTLs from the region and then taking a look at the work which has been presented, which has been developed over there. With that, thanks again for joining. And if you want to reach out, don't hesitate. I'm sure you will find us and we'll connect you with the experts, the speakers, the reports, whatever may be needed. Thanks from my side. And yes, good afternoon in the one side and a good continuation over there in DC.
Thank you very much, Carl.
Thanks again, Isabel and Anke and Marike for coming in.